Yeah, we're good to go.
Great. Okay. So thank you very much again for having me along today. It's a great opportunity to speak to a sector that I don't generally speak to. As Maria said, and Doris, I am about 5 years into the civil service now. Prior to that, I was in the UK for 20 years. In those 20 years, I never had ED&I in my job title, but it's very hard to work in the public sector in London without working on inclusion, diversity and equality. And so I had to return to Ireland, not entirely sure how useful 20 years of British social policy would be, but as it turned out, it's been very useful. So I just wanted to talk to you today about some of the work that's going on in the civil service around diversity and inclusion and creating a more multicultural workforce and some of the challenges and opportunities that presents. I should say, when I talk about the civil service, that's about 45,000 people across the 19 to 23 government departments, depending on where you count the revenue for commissioners and CSO and places like that. So it's a big enough workforce, but we need a public service that is representative of the people of this country. And I don't need to tell people on this call, but Ireland is changing. I was born and raised in this country in 1975, so lived through the 80s and the 90s here, where I was one of one everywhere I went. And frankly, I left and came back 20 years later, and I couldn't believe the change. And it was great to see, but having worked in a super diverse city like London, I know that that kind of diversity comes with challenges as well. But there is no doubt that this country is a different one to the one that I grew up in. And you can see there's more of us than ever before. We're older than ever before. More of us self-identified as having a disability. As Doris mentioned, about 12% of us have minority ethnic backgrounds. About 18% of our labour market have a migrant background. And you can see some of the groups there. Again, it won't be a surprise to see, the Poles and the Indians, Romanians, Brazilians, they're topping the list. But also in the last census, about 10,000 people identified as living in same-sex family units. They didn't actually ask about sexual orientation and things like that in the last census. They will in the next one. So we should have a much better idea of the changing nature of Irish society. And so we need a public service developed and delivered by all of those people. And it'll come as no surprise that at the moment, the Irish civil service doesn't quite match that. We're way off in some respects. You can see there that it is still majority white and Irish. There are more women in the civil service than there are men. About 12% of us identified in 2023 as having a disability versus 22% in wider society. We did actually ask about LGBT there, so we know that about 5 or 6% of the 27,000 people who responded identified as that. So while you would never get full representation, you'd like it to be a little more aligned to wider Irish society. We have an overarching strategy that guides all the work that we do around the workforce and the workplace of the future, and it calls out ED&I specifically, ensuring that we have a diverse, agile and inclusive workforce, one that's ready for the future, that we can upskill and reskill staff as we need to, and that the civil service as a brand establishes itself as an employer for choice. So a lot of the work that we do is driven at a strategic level by that transformation strategy. Some of you will be aware of some of the national strategies as well that are out there, whether it's the National Action Plan Against Racism, whether it's the Traveller and Roma Inclusion Strategy. We recently had an Equality Data Strategy as well. All of these strategies have actions for government departments about improving their workforce, about tackling bias and discrimination in the workplace, and making sure that all members of communities are represented. The department that I work for, DEEPR, the Public Sector Workforce Division, we hold the policy remit for that workforce. So we have actions in all of those strategies around improving the civil service workforce and workplace. One particular area of focus that we have at the moment is around disability inclusion. Ireland has the worst rate of disability employment, I think, in the OECD. And so we've had 20 years of the Disability Act, 2005. but we still have a really poor rate when it comes to employing people with disabilities. And we are working to change that with policies and other projects enabling our DLOs, our disability liaison officers, to be properly trained and resourced. And also we're working with our One Learning, which is the learning platform for the civil service, to increase all of the training across ED&I, multicultural, disability, neurodiversity, all of it, because we need to equip our staff with the skills. We can't expect them to just have the skills. So we are playing catch up in disability, but we are doing a lot of work there, and we are hoping we like you guys have to reach that 6% target, which the civil service has surpassed. The other 60 organisations that are staffed by civil service, a lot of them are there, some aren't, but there is a lesson there in setting targets and measuring things in order for them to get done. So that is just a quick snapshot on an area of focus at the moment. As I said, we hold the HR policies for the civil service for the 45,000 staff. We have lots of them. They're getting more progressive, I have to say. We have menopause framework now. About 90% of departments all have menopause policy in place. We also have, like everyone else, domestic violence support leave. And we've seen an uptick in that, in people accessing that, which is both good and bad news. It's obviously a policy that's needed, but it is obviously unfortunate that it is needed in the first place. We have a few new ones coming online as well. We've recently updated, say, the probation policy. We've recently updated the dignity at work policy, which is really important because we now have people coming from lots of different cultural backgrounds into the civil service, and everybody needs to understand the base level of dignity and respect in the workplace is. So we've been working hard around that. And I mentioned a reasonable accommodation policy as well there. We have different learning pathways as well. And as I mentioned, One Learning, they are our training provider. They are revamping all of their learning pathways at the moment. And they are pulling out equality, diversity and inclusion, whether you're a comms person, whether you're a HR manager, whether you're a delivery operative. Everybody will have elements of inclusion, diversity and equality in their training pathways. So that's just a bit about that kind of HR policy area. I'm sure a lot of the leave and work-life balance, what I'm hoping, are available in the HSE as well. You know, we have a lot of flexible working patterns, lots of breaks for further education, flexi time, part-time roles. A lot of that is driven by the fact that there are more women in the civil service than men, because I guess for decades women have been trying to balance home and work. And so you can see that reflected in a lot of our HR policies, although there's much more of a gender balance coming into them, but it's still more women who opt for shorter working leave, different work patterns, more flexibility, so that they can juggle the caring and the professional work as well. We have realised that our recruitment processes through public jobs, where I first managed when I joined the civil service, and no matter how inclusive we make them, some groups of people will always need a different route in, a chance for them to demonstrate their skills and their experience. Not everyone is going to nail a 45-minute interview or a 30-minute situational judgment test, as we like to do in the civil service. So we have various internships and work placements for people from traveller and Roma backgrounds. We have one for intellectually disabled people. We have one for disabled grads with the WAM program there. And the most recent one that my team was involved in is that assisted return to career, which is for people who have taken a career break for whatever reason. In reality, it was mostly women. It was 75% of women who applied, and most of them had taken time out to raise kids. And so it was for people who were looking to get back into the workplace. The one woman I spoke to had been out of the workplace for 23 years. So as you can imagine, they have a different set of challenges and hurdles to overcome. So we developed a 6-month work placement. There is a route to permanency, as we call it, at the end of that. So assuming that you successfully complete your placement, you sit a confined competition and you have a chance to secure a permanent role. Most of these programs didn't have pathways a couple of years ago. So the talent was coming in for 6 months, 9 months, and then we had to let them go again. So we have figured out how to keep that talent in the civil service, and those numbers are going up. The last one there is apprenticeships. We have a target, I think, of about 750 for apprenticeships across the civil service. The most recent one, I think, is the business and operations one in the civil service that was open recently, and we had over 800 applications, I think, for that. People want to earn and learn, and we've recognised that, particularly in the cost of living crisis that we're all facing at the moment. One other piece of work that we've recently done is around removing barriers to opportunity for people with a migrant background. Up until, I think, 2023, you basically could only work for the Irish Civil Service if you were an EEA national, or if you were married to the child of or the parent of an EEA national. So we have about 20,000 people here on stamp 4 visas. We have slightly less on stamp 5 visas. That you can live, you can work, you can run your own business, you can hire other people, but for some reason you couldn't get an entry-level role in the civil service. And we looked at that, and we worked really closely with Fragaman, which are a private sector visa company. They did the research for us. They looked at what visas and permissions that we should look at integrating into our eligibility criteria, identified stamp 4 and stamp 5 as having the highest impact and the easiest to do. And so the end result of that was that you can now apply for all jobs in the civil service if you were a stamp 4 or stamp 5 holder, irrespective of who your parents, your child, or your partner is. And we also know, because we did this in 2023 and we've been tracking it, that 5% of all people who were assigned into roles through public jobs hold a stamp 4 or stamp 5 visa. So the talent was on our doorstep. We just had to figure out how to take down some of the barriers so that they could get into our civil service. And we will continue to track that, and I am hoping it will become much more reflective of that 18% that is in the wider labour market. And look, I probably don't need to tell people on this call, but our workplace is a microcosm for what is happening outside in wider society. And while growing up in Ireland in the 70s, 80s and 90s was quite unique, it was not nearly as challenging as it is now for people of colour in this country. I was an exotic unicorn back in the 70s and 80s, and now I am a highly visible other. And that is a shift change that every country, I think, in Europe has gone through, and I'm just hoping that Ireland will do a bit better than some of our nearest neighbours. Based on the incoming data at the moment, it's not looking too hopeful. Matrix Recruitment do an ED&I survey every year, and you can see there yourself, more and more people are experiencing discrimination in the workplace. The highest is still on gender, which is both hard to believe and not hard to believe. But for the first time, I think in 2024, they asked about the rise of far right sentiment at work, and you can see there 1 in 4 of us had seen a rise in far right sentiment in the form of discriminatory jokes, misinformation, disinformation, people not calling things out in the office when they should be, far right symbols or propaganda being openly shared or displayed. So it is one to watch, but it is one of the reasons why we are so focused on ED&I in the civil service at the moment. We did a survey last year across about 60 organisations that are staffed by civil servants, just to test the water around ED&I. And the good news is that in the last 4 or 5 years, we have kind of moved from how do we do this? We really want to do this, but we don't know how to we now know how to, and we're doing it. So it's really good to see, there's increasing leadership around this. You can see some of the formal structural change that's happening, like removing those barriers. That's structural change. And that is what we need to be doing, less of the one-off projects and programs and much more of that structural change. All sorts of different policies are coming out. There's lots of organisations now that have sexual orientation and gender identity policies for people in the workplace who want to support colleagues who are transitioning or who are, going through whatever challenges are related to that. I mentioned menopause. Lots of people have ED&I policies, gender policies. People understand that those policies are essential to creating that inclusive environment that we're looking for. I mentioned the training that we're working on as well, and more people are understanding that it's unrealistic to expect someone who's never managed someone with neurodiversity to just instinctively know how to manage someone who's neurodiverse. Guidance and toolkits are on the rise because people are really keen to figure out how to do it. We have an increasing number of staff networks, which is great to see, both localised ones in various departments, but ones that are starting to span across the civil service. Our Minister, Jack Chambers, there helped us launch the Irish Traveller Network there a couple of weeks ago. We have PWID, which is our LGBT one. And so that is a really good way to stay engaged with our workforce and understand what the key issues and concerns are. Shit. Oh, can you still see me? Oh, sorry, I lost power there. Hang on. Stop sharing.
I can still see you, Siobhán.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on here. I just had one more slide though. That's good news. I was on it. Oh yeah, there you go. So staff networks, a bit more, we need to get much better with our data. It's very hard to drive any kind of evidence-based or data-driven policy if there isn't any data. So we're looking at how we can get better with that as well. Like the last question in that survey was kind of, are you pushing open doors? Or does anybody, or there's no interest in ED&I and it's not on the agenda? And over 50%, we're kind of at the top end of that going, it's on our agenda. Either my senior managers really get it or we're pushing open doors. There were very few who didn't have ED&I at all on the agenda or, who were really struggling to get engagement on it. So I suppose we are on a journey in the civil service like everywhere else. I don't know if we'll ever be off the journey, but we have certainly made progress in some key areas. We have a lot more to do. And that's just, there's loads of other stuff going on, but that was just a whistle-stop tour of what's happening. So I will stop there and I guess hand over to the next speaker, or if you want me to take some questions now, I can do either one.
Yeah, we'll go through some questions now first. Thanks.